Welcome back to the Aspiring Adult Podcast. This is your host, Sarah Smiles, and this week we are continuing our Becoming series where I have been interviewing people that are fostering passion projects, are working on creating their own businesses, and this week we have on Max Rattner.
I'm Max.
Max and I went to college together, and you'll hear us reference a few times the city of Oxford that we went to school in, and I know what you're thinking. No, this isn't Oxford, the accredited institution across the pond. This is Oxford, Ohio, where Miami University resides. Anyways, Max is a creator and he is the founder of Storybottle, which is an LLC that he's created to kind of market his brand a little bit more. And we'll get more into depth on how he did that and what he really does for his creator status for Storybottle in the podcast. And welcome on, Max. Hey, Max.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
We have a great looking background.
Cool. I like it. It has some personality, a little flair. I like the cowboy hats.
Yeah, I wish they were my cowboy hats. They're my girlfriend's, but
I
borrowed them on occasion.
That's awesome. Where does she live?
She's 2 years younger than me, so she's in Oxford right now. So I'm in Oxford.
So you're in Oxford?
I am. I'm doing freelance work for the past week, and then for one more week, I've been doing freelance work in Cincinnati, so it's kind of perfect because I'm getting free rent.
Yeah, that's awesome. So your freelance work, I obviously follow you on social media. So is that just like your senior pictures? Is that your freelance sort of labor for the moment?
Definitely. So there's a few parts of it, 3 main weeks. The first week, it was for one of the a cappella groups. They had they wanted one of their concerts recorded. And then that also turned into a few bands at Brick wanted their concerts recorded. And then the second week, it was the MUFD fashion show. I took some pictures, which my girlfriend's the head of marketing and a model for, so she wanted me to take pictures.
Yeah.
And then this next upcoming week, I'm doing a video for a market research firm. But while I've been here, I was like, I'm here. I'm not going to just drink, or else I feel like I'm wasting time. So I've been a bunch of grad photos. I've been interviewing people for this new TikTok, maybe YouTube series, and a few videos for some student fashion brands.
That's awesome because it's a bunch of different environments that you're recording. Obviously, going from Brick to a fashion show is a very different environment.
So for the past 3-4 years, I've been doing video, photo related creative content. And that started during COVID when I had no idea what I wanted to do. I changed my major 5 times while in school because I was just trying to figure out what to do. During COVID, I took a step back and I kind of wanted to realize what I enjoyed. So I started just cold messaging people on LinkedIn. They weren't even really creators because some of them were near creators, but the term creator wasn't really established yet. Some people worked at BuzzFeed, some people were just videographers at actual production companies. And it ended up during the COVID summer, I did some shadowing at a production company in Chicago where I learned a bunch because I knew absolutely nothing. And that snowballed into getting me to do a documentary for a nonprofit. That snowballed into just me actually understanding how to make and edit videos, and then doing a bunch of freelance. And then in this past year, I started getting a lot more into the creator space. So making my own content, and then on the flip side, working with creators as kind of a creative director role.
Yeah, that's awesome. So kind of circling back to, obviously, we met in college. So we met through, I think it was Red Hawk was how we met.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was an extremely different experience for both of us because neither of us are in VC any longer. Yeah. So explain kind of your journey throughout college and how you kind of figured out what was for you and what wasn't for you.
Yeah, I learned a lot of what wasn't for me.
Yeah, that's honestly super important and valuable.
Definitely. So I'll start with the majors and then just kind of web in So I came into school, I had no idea what I wanted. I actually picked Miami. So the deadline I think was like May 5th, and I put my deposit down at like May 4th, 11:52 p.m. It ended up being like 11:58 because the first credit card got declined because I didn't realize it was expired. Um,
Mm,
but I picked Miami like last minute, and
yeah.
I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do. But
Hmm.
after talking to like my dad and older kind of relatives, I decided I might as well just apply to the business school because like it's hard to get into when you're like a student, but it's a lot easier when you're applying. So I did that. I did the core, so like the first year integrated core, which is just like the baseline challenges for freshmen or
All
for
of the hardo business classes.
yeah. Like the like I like to call it like it's the pledging of the business school.
Honestly, it really is.
Yeah. I did that, and then as soon as I did the pledging, I dipped out of the business school. I
Mm,
went to I declared as a social studies education major because
hmm.
that's something I've always been like really passionate about. Um, but then I kind of decided for like a lot of reasons. One, like I couldn't see myself just being a teacher for like 50, 60 years. And after talking to like a lot of professors and other teachers, we kind of got to the ideology that like if I really like this, it's a lot more beneficial to go into like a field I'm interested in and then
Hmm.
come back as like a professor instead. Because if you really think about some of like the coolest professors probably that you've had too, anyone in general, they're all ones that have had real like life experiences because then they're not teaching just from a textbook, they're teaching from practical examples.
Hmm.
So my plan was like, I'll teach later. I'll figure it out then. So I then turned to poli sci. I did that for literally like a week, and then I was like, I literally signed up for all my classes, and I was like, I don't want to do poli sci. So
Yeah.
then I switched to psychology because I was like, psychology. Down the line, I could teach social studies psychology or like the psychology of marketing. Um,
Hmm.
I did that for a semester. I liked the classes, but psychology just seemed like it's universal, but it seemed like too universal for me.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to pick something that was more specialized in a way. I
Hmm.
ended up with IMS, Interactive Media Studies, which was also now called Emerging Technology in Business and Design, which I like to say is like the love child of like Adobe Creative Cloud, a little bit of coding, design,
Hmm.
ended up with that. And also on the course of all this, I always had like a minor or co-major in entrepreneurship just because I liked those classes because they're all project based, they were all application based, which I thought was a lot more valuable um, than just taking exams for anything that I wanted to do. Like I didn't want to be a lawyer, I didn't want to go to med school. So I thought actually doing something was interesting. So I ended with emerging technology, business and design, and entrepreneurship. And kind of going back to your original question of like where I like I guess the orgs that maybe I did and like didn't do. I literally it was coming from high school. I don't know. I'm sure you were like this in high school to some extent. Like I wanted to touch every single org
Oh
in
yeah.
like, high school. And I did the same thing here until I realized I don't like half the orgs that I'm in. Um, I was in like this honors student board, which I like didn't spend any time for. I was on club tennis for a semester, which was cool,
Hmm.
but then that was taking up too much time. And then my sophomore year, I got introduced into Red Hawk.
Hmm.
Um, and I thought it was interesting because I had never heard of the term VC before, but I always thought startups were cool because I was like in entrepreneurship. And then I ended up getting into that, which was cool. My sophomore and like part of my junior year, that was like one of my favorite orgs I was in. It was a lot more tight knit, honestly, than it is now.
Hmm.
Um, but I
Well, that was
learned like,
also cool because like getting your hands in everything, like that was what
yeah.
VC's kind of goal is getting your hands in everything. So you got to learn a lot about the real world in a lot of different capacities. So that makes sense for you.
No, it 100%. It made perfect sense because like we got to talk with so many different startups and it was really I liked it because I was coming from like the view of like I want to be on the startup side. So when we had conversations, I kind of put myself in like their shoes,
Yeah.
which a lot of the team members did, but some of the team members came from more of like a finance background. So I would think it was good to get that balance. Overall,
So already then you were creating
yeah.
narratives like in the VC realm. So that okay.
Yeah, no, it was definitely just kind of like I remember one of the biggest things as an org we always said was just like focus on the founders. So I was always focused on like the founders story. Like one of my favorite questions to always ask was like, how did you come up with the idea?
Hmm.
Because I think that's a big just description of like the company as a whole, the foundations of it. But I loved Red Hawk. Wasn't super involved my senior year, but that's just because after COVID, like a
Right.
lot of other orgs, it did kind of lose a part of its magic.
Hmm.
And then so then COVID happened, and then I kind of touched on it. I got into starting to figure out what I wanted, shadowing, getting into all of that, and shadowing like the production companies.
Hmm.
And then
Was
that
that a
summer
result
was
of like the cold
yeah.
emailing that you did or cold
Yes, yeah,
messaging? Okay.
yeah. So I thought of the idea to start cold messaging. So I was in a program called like, have you heard of the Altman program?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Did you do it?
No, I didn't. I actually wasn't in the business school, believe it or not. So I wasn't
I thought
allowed to. No, I was an engineer.
I knew you were an engineer. I thought you had like a minor in business or entrepreneurship or something.
No, nothing. I was not affiliated with the business school whatsoever besides for Red Hawk.
Really? That's
Yeah.
cool. That's
Hmm.
funny. Um, but I basically what that was is just like they help you find internships, and through it they taught us like networking skills, and they touched on a really valuable point that I still value and still try to kind of use when you're messaging people, like cold emailing or like cold LinkedIn messaging people. If you say like you're a professional and you're like, "Oh, I'd love to pick your brain," then they're probably going to send you back their consulting rates. But if you say you're a student, you're not really trying to get anything out of them except like knowledge, and like it's not like you can over leverage it like an actual, I guess, other worker would. So I try to do that as much as possible. I even do that now. I like to say like I'm a recent grad if I'm like reaching
Hmm.
out to someone. And that's what kind of how I touched on enabled me to snowball as like a PA into shooting a documentary and then the freelance work. After my senior kind of summer, I ended up getting this internship with this company in Australia, which was really, really cool. It was like a contract job as like a videographer, creator, and a creative strategist, which are the two things that like I want to be spending all of my time with. So kind of doing that as like a quote unquote like full-time job was really cool. I did that this past summer. And then in the fall, I graduated because last spring I took a gap semester to work.
Hmm.
Um, and then we're kind of getting to where I am now, graduating in December, and then in January. And pause me if you have any questions, because I'm just word vomiting my life.
No, I
Um,
love it. It's great.
Graduated in December, and the past semester, honestly, school was like my lowest priority. Like most of my class, like even the entrepreneurship classes, we were like working with clients, which was cool. But to me, I was just like, I'm working with clients on the side and getting paid for it. I'm like paying to work with clients, which I thought was kind of goofy, but I definitely still did learn a lot. But I liked doing the freelance more
Hmm.
last semester just because it was getting like me a real sense of the work that I wanted to do and which work I didn't want to do. And then come January, I started my own like boutique media agency. Like I got an LLC. I started kind of like reaching out to more clients. And so from January to now, that's kind of been my thing. Half of my time, like I want to spend creating my own content, and half the time as like the director of the agency, working with clients in a freelance capacity, generally on social media ads or like social media style content, live
Hmm.
event, and strategy.
That's awesome. So, with all of that being tied into what you learned in college and then additionally what you learned on your own, obviously learning how to cold message through the Altman Institute or the Altman program.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
So going out to Australia and that whole experience. So what was that like? Obviously, like you're messaging someone that you don't even know, soliciting advice, and then all of a sudden you're moving out there. Like, what was that like?
It was the coolest experience of my life. I want to go back.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Like, that sounds amazing. I'm jealous.
Well, so plug for this program. This is the short version of the long story, but it was
Mhm.
actually like a bunch of kind of like turns in how I got to Australia. So my junior year, I think spring of 21, um, I was going to Luxembourg,
Mhm.
and there was the, have you heard of the Gilman Fellowship?
No.
Okay. A lot of people have. It's like this, I don't even know how I heard about it. I think Miami sent an email, but it
Mhm.
was this like study abroad government sponsored fellowship, and literally the day it was due,
Of
I
course.
sent it in. I sent it in, and it's crazy because I got it, and I was very surprised I got it because it was a low acceptance rate, but I did get it, and basically it was like
They
a
must have just seen it was at the top of the pile and they're like, oh, Max Rattner, sure, why not?
yeah, yeah,
Why isn't
yeah.
he deserving of it?
Yeah, it was like bingo. They just picked it like Rattner. All right, just toss it to him. Um, no, I got it and it was really cool. And it was like a pretty decent size of money. But they wouldn't sponsor me going to Luxembourg that spring because it was still COVID. And the government was like, we're not going to give you money to go travel during COVID. So I had to defer it to the fall.
Hmm.
And I deferred it to like this virtual internship through this
Hmm.
program called Artbound Initiative, which is like a program you pay for to get free internships, which is actually pretty common in like a lot of other countries. So, but I
Just
didn't.
not here.
Yeah, not really. Like, well, they have programs here, but I feel like most people like in the creative space can find an internship here, but I think just different like company culture, it's harder to find it in other countries. I'm not sure the exact
Hmm.
reason, but I mean, there's enough
Yeah.
value of it. They have a whole company around it.
Hmm.
But I got to do that, and it charged money, but I got to cover it with my fellowship, and I even got to pocket a little. So I guess it was
That's
technically paid for
amazing.
me, which was really cool. So I did like a virtual internship with this agency in Australia. I loved the people I was working with. Even with like a 14-hour time difference, we like were able to get some cool stuff out. And they asked me like if I wanted to, we were joking at the beginning. He was like, "Oh, when you come out to Australia." And then he was like, would you want to come out?" And I was like, "Yeah."
That's
Um,
amazing. Holy, that's quite the transition, especially because I feel like a lot of content, or if not all content, can be made wherever you're at. So you don't necessarily need to be in Australia.
no, I mean, yeah, you could be anywhere. Like I was
Hmm.
making some social media videos for them here, just recording it in my room and then sending it off. Um, but going to Australia didn't feel like it happened and still doesn't feel like I really went there.
Yeah.
But when I did go there, it was really funny because it sounds like a broken record. The night before I found where I was living, the night before I found where I was living, on this website called Flatmates, and
Hmm.
I was really nervous because I was gonna be living with this random guy for like 3 months, and I get there, and it was like one of the cheapest places I found and one of the nicest areas, like a walk to work, and I instantly clicked with the guy. His name was Caleb. I love Caleb. I brought him Chick-fil-A sauce. He ate that up. We hung out a lot. We got a lot of Vietnamese food. I honestly miss him a bunch. Um, and that on its own experience was cool. The work, I loved the company. The only the only like two negatives I would say about my entire experience. One, the first week, like I felt very lonely just because
Hmm.
I was across the world. Like everyone was a 14-hour time difference. Um, but then I was able to kind of surpass that once I got over like this hump. Facebook is really big there. So I started joining like Facebook groups. Like there's a Yes Theory Facebook group, which is like a big YouTube channel that I follow. And I'm met a bunch of people who I would still say are some like some of my closest friends. Don't really keep in contact with them because it's so difficult, but I was super close with them when I was there. The only other negative would have been that I was only, it was like a negative and a positive technically. I was only working there 3 days a week
Hmm.
because that's how kind of we set up the contract. So the other 2 days I was doing freelance. I was like trying to find freelance gigs. I didn't honestly find that many, so I was just making like content or just catching up on previous work. So I kind of wish I would have spent more time working with the agency,
Hmm.
but it was an incredible experience. I went to some cool places. I loved every single person that I met, and I learned a good amount of stuff in work. I kind of wish I would have stayed longer, but I also feel like I stayed a perfect amount. But I do
Hmm.
know at some point I want to go
So
back.
what were like the major differences between living in Australia versus living in the United States?
First of all, everything is left. Literally the
Okay.
first week I would bump into people. Also just with like general, I guess, social media, modern stuff, they're like a little bit behind. Like when I was there, like they were still TikTok was still new to them. Like I was saying, Facebook was really big to them. They were just starting to get like some fast food, like US based fast food places. Like I remember they said they just got like a Taco Bell when I was on the
Wow.
call. Nobody liked it
How progressive
there.
of them. A
I
Taco Bell.
know.
That's crazy. Baja
um,
Blasts. I feel like that's what pumps through an Australian's veins. It's like Baja Blast, no?
it's their own Baja Blast. Oh, one
Yeah.
really cool experience was one of my friends from Miami. Her name's Charlotte. She's so cool. Um, she's from Sydney, but she went to Miami, and I visited her and her family for a weekend. So fun. Like her and I weren't even like that close before, but we got really
Hmm.
close. Um,
Obviously, like if you're a world apart from everybody else that you know, you do develop that sort of relationship with somebody just because like your proximity to them and you have so much in common just being on the same continent. Like
yeah,
being that Australia is like so remote.
no, it was amazing, and her family was really really cool. We ate kangaroo, which was it just tastes. I'm gonna be honest, it's just like a really really well cooked steak. Like it wasn't bad. It's just funny. It's like apparently it's like 97% meat, like almost no fats because it's really lean. So a bunch of
Wow.
weightlifters eat it.
Wow. And is
Um,
that like eating chicken or like eating a cow? Like, what is the relationship there? Because I feel like kangaroos are sacred in Australia. Just in my brain, that may not be fact, but that's how I view it in my brain.
they're kind of like deer. Like I literally have videos on my phone of like kangaroo crossing signs. It's like overpopulation. Like I don't even
Oh.
don't quote me on this if you're from Australia and you listen to this, but I'm pretty sure you don't even need a license to like hunt them because there's so many of them. You might need like a machine gun on a kangaroo though. They were like ripped. It was
Those
crazy. They were
I've seen
ripped. They
some
had six
memes
pack.
about, yeah, yeah. I've seen memes about like super ripped kangaroos, and it's like who would win in a fight, Dwayne the Rock Johnson or this kangaroo?
A
And
kangaroo? Are you kidding me?
unmatched. Like those things are absolute units. Their biceps are as big as my thighs.
I know. They're crazy. That was one of the really funny things, cool things to see. Like I remember as soon as I got back, because I still had one semester at Miami, the video I showed every single person was like a video I saw of a kangaroo hopping around. I was like, look, it's a freaking kangaroo.
That's amazing. And while you were working there, like, did that ever become something that you were like unfazed by at any point? Or was that kind of just like the nuance of it was still present the entire time you were there?
Like being surrounded in
Yeah.
Australia. Um, I didn't really stay phased by it. I
Hmm.
don't know. As soon as like even when I studied abroad, as soon as I'm like there for like a week or like 2 weeks, I have like object lack of object permanence. I just forget about like really everything else in the world. I'm just like I'm in Australia. It's not like
Yep.
whoa, I'm in Australia or anything like that. Like
Yeah.
it still doesn't. It's still really weird. One of you'll think this is cool. One of my favorite stories from there, which is a video that I like started literally editing like probably like as soon as it happened, but I still haven't gotten around to finishing it just because it was so cool. And I was like, it needs to be a perfect edit. I went to Phillip island. I kept calling it Phillips Island, but it's like where Pengu it's the most southern point of Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or like the Victoria area.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's an island, and it's where like it's really special because every single night at 9 p.m. penguins come on shore and you get to see fairy penguins. Um, but I went there on the 4th of July because I didn't have work and I thought it'd be like I'm not gonna do the 4th of July
How
here.
patriotic of you, yeah.
I know penguins, penguin triotic.
In
um,
Australia.
yeah. Um, but it was like an adventure on itself getting there. I did take a train and then like their version of a Greyhound and then like a taxi. And on the taxi ride, he was like the first like stereotypical Australian I met, like very
Mm,
thick. Like he was like, "You're an American," and like all
yeah.
this stuff. Side note, everyone there thought I was Canadian. They said it was kind of how
Okay.
I sounded like Canadian.
Well, it's
Um,
probably because you're not like a stereotypical man American. Like, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, like
So maybe that's a compliment. I
I
don't know.
I think it was a compliment. Um, but I get there and it's finally like I leave at like 10 a.m. It's finally like 6 p.m. The penguins are supposed to come out. The last bus to get back home leaves at like 6:30. My taxi driver needed to get there like 6:20, like we had to leave by like 6:10. So
Hmm.
the penguins are supposed to be out at 5:30. The clock's ticking. It turns 6. No penguins. Like 6:05, we finally start to see the penguins. They're coming out. I start getting calls on my phone, like, and I'm running. Like I had to like leave the penguin stage and try to run to the front of like the museum, the exhibit to meet him. I get like 3 calls. I start running because I wanted to see the penguins. I like came all the way there for the penguins. And I'm running, and literally as I get there, I see the car drive off, and
No.
I was like having like a mini panic attack. I started going to like there was these like big buses. I was like, is there any way I could pay for like a bus ticket? Is there any way I could pay for a bus ticket? Like, where are you going? They said, we're full, and I was like starting to really freak out. So I start going up to like strangers. I'm like, is there any way I could pay you to take me to this bus stop? No, like 5 no's. The clock is ticking, like the bus is leaving in like 20 minutes. So I've kind of like partially given up.
So
So
you're gonna run.
I wish I can't. There was no sidewalks. It was just like a highway, basically.
No.
So I start looking at Airbnbs, I start looking at hostels. There's none. It's like all completely booked. So I started asking some of the workers, like, is there any way you could drive me? And they're like, dude, we're working. Like, this place doesn't close for another like 10 minutes. And I was like, when it closes, the last bus is there. So I'm freaking out. I'm having like a mini panic attack. Like, I'm gonna have to sleep with the penguins or some
Hmm.
shit. And I'm sitting inside and I text in like the Yes Theory, this like Facebook group chat. I was like, just like last result, is anybody here? Literally like 2 minutes to close, I get a text. One of my friends are like, yeah, I'm here. Like, did you want to take a picture with the penguins? I called her like 5 times. I was like, answer, answer, answer. And then she's like, oh, 1 second. So she's texting me back. She's like, oh, what's up? I was like, is there any chance you could like drive me to like the nearest next bus stop? And she's like, oh, like what happened? And I told her what happened. And she's like, oh, like we live in Fitzroy, which is literally the town over from me. They're like, we'll just drive you back. And
Oh my gosh.
I was like,
That's
what
unreal.
the fuck? I literally could not stop saying thank you in the car. She was so nice. I'm pretty sure her name was Sarah too. There you go.
It's
And
just a Sarah thing.
her like they were like family friends that she was staying with. Um, and they were so nice to me on the ride back. And I literally could not believe that I got home that night. Like it was still so crazy. That was one of the most surreal experiences of the whole trip.
So how did you capture that on camera? Or was it just kind of like intermittent things and it would be like voiceover? Because that's an insane story.
So my only regret is that like from running and then to finding Sarah, I didn't record because I was just very focused on trying to find a way home. But the entire day, like I was recording up to that because I knew it'd be a video. And then after Sarah picked me up, I knew it'd be a video. But kind of the current edit, that like I hadn't touched for a few months was more of like a normal YouTube vlog where it's
Mhm.
just like this is a few snippets of like random stuff that happened, and then like this is when I decided to like go see penguins on 4th of July in like Max Rattner style, and then going through events, like getting in the taxi, and then I thought about doing like, oh, I'll do a part two after I leave, but I was like going back and forth, and now I don't want to like explain too much of the newest edit that I was thinking about,
Yeah.
but I'm basically going along like current kind of trends. The plan is like I decided to go see the Penguins because they're not making a Happy Feet 3 and I miss Penguins or something like
Yeah.
that. Like kind of turning into a trend like that, like
Hmm.
inspired by like creators like Ryan Trahan who are like going at like bigger picture and then funneling down. But
Hmm.
that's kind of the plan. It's I kind of shot it like a YouTube video, but I shot all of that vertically on my phone.
Hmm.
Um, where it's I had some talking like in the moment, but generally for most of those videos it's a voiceover.
Yeah. And with this would be like one of the side projects that you're working on personally. Does that belong under the LLC that you made, or how does the LLC kind of tie into everything that you're working on?
Yeah, that was something I was going back and forth on because a lot of
Hmm.
my favorite like brands are also like media empires like Yes Theory. Um, it's the brand and it's like the brand, it's like the clothing. They created movies and all their content falls under them, and then they have like four main talent, or they did. Um, but I kind of talking to like some creators that I've like done work for and just talking to other creators that I'm friends with, I'm deciding kind of to make like at Max Ratner at Max Rat either or the like front where I'm gonna put all of like my creative work, all of the vlogs, all of the TikToks, YouTube, and then
Hmm.
Story Bottle is like the more services side. Um,
Gotcha.
Sometimes like I have a few social platforms that are like at Story Bottle, which is the name of the boutique agency. Um, and like if something's just like a straight up like ad and doesn't have me in it, maybe I'd put it on there and then
Hmm.
maybe like the behind the scenes or like the voiceover walkthrough on mine. But
Hmm. So the
for
LLC
yeah,
is Storybottle or is it Max Ratner?
the LLC is Story Bottle.
Okay.
Yeah. Even like any brand work I've done, I still just have it come to the LLC. Maybe I've thought about that like a year, 2, 3 years, once I'm able to like grow my own personal brand a lot more and focus on it, I'd probably get like a second LLC if it seemed
Hmm.
like it would make more sense. But like the actual work between both of them is all video, media, social media related. So I didn't think it was that like big of an issue. Like
Hmm.
speaking of that, like the difference in branding and things like that.
Right. So building an LLC, kind of similar to like the Yes Theory. Why did you decide to make an LLC this early on?
Definitely. I think just because the LLC is more like client facing from
Hmm.
everyone I've talked, it's just a lot more credibility and professional. Like
Hmm.
also there's a lot of tools that like I've seen that like you need an LLC to apply for programs. And down the line for like tax purposes, if you ever want to get an S corp, it's a lot more beneficial. But it was mostly for professional and credibility. I
Hmm.
have some friends who like their LLC is just their name, but they're also like very just they're like they want to be full-time creators. I kind of want to be half and half, so that's kind of my way to split it.
Yeah.
Also, if I ever like in 10 years really want to just grow Story Bottle separately, I don't have to go through the process. Like right now I'm letting it them kind of like dip toes in the same pool, but
Hmm.
I have the option to split it and it could be its own separate brand if it ever needed
Hmm.
to be, but it's still like Story Bottle by Max Ratner.
Gotcha. And what was building that LLC process like? Like, how did you know how to do that or what the process was in doing that?
Definitely. It came starting back from like square one. It came from my first interest in startups and like my
Hmm.
first ever internship was at a startup during that COVID summer. And then through Red Hawk and just like continued interest in startups, like a startup weekend here, helping my cousin and like other people I knew in the startup industry, I just learned a lot about the business aspects. And my dad owns his own company, so I was able to ask him some like legal-esque questions. And
Hmm.
I was really privileged and like I was looking into Zoom info, but then when I talked to my dad about it, he said just use my guy. So I just had a call with him and then I just paid him right away. Getting an LLC is really easy. Um,
Hmm.
but I think a lot of people don't, at least people I know in the creative industry don't, and I'm still learning it, but don't really know like the benefits of it. Like
Hmm.
the most black and white benefit of it is like limited liability company. Like right now, I'm honestly getting taxed pretty similarly than like I would normally. But again, it just went back to credibility and like taking the next step as like I want to start an agency. The first step in starting any company is getting an LLC.
Gotcha. Okay. And the LLC process is probably like pretty easy because it's pretty similar across the board as to like what everyone's LLC is. It's pretty much just like plug in storybottle here, plug in Max Rattner there, plug in storybottle here. So it's pretty
Yeah.
uniform across the board. Was there anything that when during the process you were kind of a little wary of, or that it didn't really fit with your core values of what you were trying to make storybottle appear as?
The only thing I was like weary of was honestly just like deciding whether I did want to make it like Max Rattner
Hmm.
LLC or Storybottle LLC, so like the branding, but the
Yeah.
actual like legal, it was so black and white. Like it
Hmm.
honestly wasn't like that hard. If anyone wants to get an LLC, do
Yeah.
it.
Well, you could honestly
And
probably write your own LLC with ChatGPT and just be like, "Hey, write me a LLC documentation paperwork
yeah,
thing for
yeah,
Storybottle."
no, yo, you definitely could.
That would be huge. So, how did you come up with the name of Storybottle?
That is, yeah. I first of all, I love the name. One of my like biggest things is just like I want to make sure this name is mine.
Yeah, it's a good
So
name. It's a really good name.
thank you. Um, I really wanted the word story, and I really wanted like another just like fun word that you could use for branding. Like I look up to like, do you know Lyrical Lemonade at all? It's a brand by a guy named Cole Bennett, who's a huge like director, music video director in Chicago. He literally just made a video with Jack Black, coolest guy ever. Um, and I kind of like that he had like something that's part of the industry, lyrical, and then he had something that's kind of more fun, separate.
Yeah.
So I looked to that. I also looked to like like startup companies like DoorDash, like a word that you can kind of like say it's like two separate words but like put together, story bottle.
Yeah.
Um, and then it originally was like story in a bottle. That kind of like if you think of like a pirate ship or like coming off from the shore, like story in a bottle.
Yeah.
And I haven't done it yet, but one thing that I plan on doing in the future is like giving clients like files on like a flash drive that's like a USB and a cork. So that's like their
Oh,
story
that's
bottle.
fun.
Yeah.
That's such a good idea. And are you documenting these ideas as you're coming up with them? Because I mean, obviously, like some of these things are way further out and some of these are a little bit closer. Like, how are you keeping track of your process and your progress?
Yeah, that's a big hurdle that was for me just because like sometimes I literally can't fall asleep if I like think of something. I need to just write it down. So the two or three tools that I use for all of that, like organization and like just holding kind of like a digital brain, is this program called Todoist, which
Hmm.
I've had a lot of people like ask me about, and I've told a lot of people about because it's the coolest program ever. Not sponsored by Todoist, but they did retweet one of my tweets about them, which was
That's
cool.
huge. It's basically
Um,
like you're promoted by them.
Basically, it's more of a like to do program, but it's so like easy to just like write down something and then put it in like kind of they have a Kanban board like Trello does.
Hmm.
You can organize it by project. So I have like a backlog of ideas for like story bottle, backlog of ideas for like content and things like that. I also use just my notes if I just need to like write a bunch of stuff down and then organize it into Todoist. And I used to use Notion a lot. I don't use it that much just because it's not really easy to use on the phone and like a lot of times if I think of something I just want to, I'm usually not close to my laptop. I'm like walking or something. So I just want to write it down and
Yeah.
kind of be in the moment.
Yeah, that's awesome and a really good way of documenting things. I personally just use literally like a notebook and a pen, and that's how I document everything. So sometimes these questions that I ask are mostly like for me. I'm like, oh, how can I better run my podcast? Should I be making an LLC? But yeah, it's a really cool process and it's definitely interesting to hear about, and especially because like being something that you're so passionate about and you can see that you're passionate about it. You love telling stories. It was obviously a commonality between things that you did in your previous majors in college and then translated that narrative or storytelling into what your professional work is. And so now that you're kind of doing this storytelling and you're creating like TikToks that I've seen. So what's the thing that you've been getting the most traction on? Is it YouTube videos? Is it tweets? Is it TikToks? What is it?
It's been very back and forth, and it's kind of on my end. I have not been at all consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's the hardest
in a
part,
few like
truly.
yeah, I haven't been able to be consistent while posting,
Mm-hmm.
and it's funny because I just had a call with one of my friends, Luke, yesterday, and like one of every like creator, except for like some of the biggest creators, but even them still, all have like a bottleneck to some way, and my
Mm-hmm.
bottleneck right now is actually getting stuff created because like I've on my notes and like on my to-doist, I probably have like 100 videos like shot of like me running around and like in the backlog, but then I like forget about it and I like
Mm-hmm.
think of another video idea and then I don't have enough time to do that one and then I think
Mm-hmm.
of another one. So there's literally probably like 20 just from Australia that I shot that I still haven't posted, probably like 20 from study abroad I haven't even made. Um, but that's my biggest problem is the consistency. The best traction, um, probably YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Just I've just started going to long form content this year, and it's something that I really want to do more this year. But I've also kind of at a thought point that I want to grow on short form and then put more time into long form, kind of like feed the machine.
Mm-hmm.
But even like my first long form video, like got 900 views, which I was pretty happy with as like a long
Yeah,
form
that's
video.
awesome.
But the best traction I've ever had on a video, one of like my favorite videos I've ever made, was in Australia. It was on the story of me figuring out where I was living literally the night before.
I think I
It
watched
was
this one.
oh really?
Yeah,
It's the best. It's like the most viewed video I've done so far. It was on Facebook. It got 2 million views, which is sick because
that's
that's like
huge.
the best for me. And it was funny because it was like on Facebook, and I personally just like threw it on like secondly because I mostly wanted it to be on like YouTube and
Mm-hmm.
TikTok. But my in this past like 4 months, my platform with the highest traction has been LinkedIn, just because how I'm like editing my videos, kind of like my thought process of I need to get all these videos, I need to shoot it, I need to edit it, I need to spend like probably like 2 or 3 hours versus on LinkedIn. I either have like a backlog of ideas from in Todoist or I just like think of something that I just read or saw or talked about and
Mm-hmm.
then I post it like instantly and it takes like a minute. So
Yeah.
I'm finding that really easy to do like almost every single day. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had pretty decent traction. I got um a client off of it. I've had multiple like people like DM me asking me to from it. And I've like just grown a lot. It's good to get like at least that muscle rolling. And I've also am kind of starting to use it as like a platform to show TikTok and YouTube videos. Long um kind of like long term, I guess my three main platforms would honestly probably be LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube.
Yeah. And with LinkedIn, because I did notice I am connected with you on LinkedIn, that you're
Yeah,
very
yeah.
active on it, which to me, it's like I am not confident enough to do that in like a professional realm. So that takes a new level of confidence. Do you approach your posts on LinkedIn differently? Because I know there's kind of a running joke of like you post differently on Twitter than you do on Instagram than you do on Facebook. Like you gear Facebook towards like something your grandma would see, whereas your Instagram is something that your friends see, and your LinkedIn is something that like your professional side. So like you're all quartered off into like different or thirded off, I guess, because they're only listed three things.
Yeah, yeah,
But you're
yeah.
all thirded off into whatever your sector is. So being a storyteller and having a personality, it largely falls under your professional scope. So do you approach LinkedIn differently than how you approach other forms of social media?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it is, you were kind of hitting it on the point. Like, it's funny because when I talk to my other friends, like, dude, like, I've been on LinkedIn, like, LinkedIn actually has been so cool. They're like, what? Because a lot of them are like in finance or just like
Mm-hmm.
paid marketing and things like that. But for me, like, my side of my corner, my third of LinkedIn is all other like creators, either full-time creators, people managing creators, people who are just like content posters or ghost writers on LinkedIn. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it, I guess, is like edgy for LinkedIn, but like
Yeah,
normal for
for
content.
your side,
And
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I'm really just using the same voice, maybe like a touch more professional, but
Mm-hmm.
like some of my videos like I just that I'm posting on YouTube, I literally just post on LinkedIn and I don't make like a separate edit for it. And then I don't ever feel that like I have to like filter myself that much.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just choose to use different words depending on like the crowd. But honestly, one of my favorite reasons and why I like the platform is because like first of all, I have an agency, so like there's a part of me that's client facing. And when I'm posting on like TikTok, I don't know who's gonna see it. But when I
Mm-hmm.
know when I post anything on LinkedIn, I know people that are at least more professionally focused to some extent are gonna see it, which generally is like more in my target market for
Yeah, definitely.
a chunk of my content at least.
Yeah, because there's a different breed of human, which I'm finding myself resonating more with, that when they get on in bed at night and they start scrolling through their social media, LinkedIn is the social media that they're scrolling through.
Yeah,
And I'm victim to that. Like I am scrolling through LinkedIn. I'm like, why am I on LinkedIn? Like why is this what I'm looking at right
you're a
now?
professional.
I'm a young professional. I'm just trying to be ambitious and get after it in the late night hours. No, but that's extremely cool. And I don't think that I am well equipped to start posting in my voice on LinkedIn yet. I haven't gotten that comfortable. So maybe I need to take a page out of your book and just kind of pull the trigger and do it. Maybe like a 11:59 post on New Year's Eve. That'll be my New Year's resolution.
Yeah, yeah.
No, but that's awesome. So obviously, like creating a bunch of different content on a bunch of different platforms. What's your favorite piece of content, whether it's a picture, a video, a story that you've done, that you've created, that you're most proud of?
Yeah. Let me honestly, yeah, the one that made me the proudest so far isn't even really like a social media post
Yeah.
exactly. It was the documentary I did for the JCC,
Hmm.
just because to date, I would still say that was one of my hardest projects, just because I like they came to me with it without really much structure of
Hmm.
it. So I like created the whole structure. I shot the whole thing. I edited most of it and like with the team we created the whole story and like completely own something and learn the whole time, which was probably one of the most learning I've ever done. But when it actually got posted, it didn't get like a million, 2 million views. I think it only got like 6,000, which is like I thought that was great, like
Yeah, that's
organically.
still awesome.
Um, but all the comments were just like, "Oh my God, this makes me perfectly feel like I'm in camp." Like this, like grandmas and grandpas were like, "This brings me back." Like I'm so happy to see like my grandchildren and like a lot of my past campers, because I was also like a counselor and a camper there. Like
Hmm.
texted me, they're like, I love the documentary. I love what you did," because it was something that was so like sentimental and emotional, and I
Hmm.
felt like we were able to capture it well and execute it well.
Hmm.
And after so much work at like such a big project with like a purpose for it to finally get executed and executed well, it like has the most value, the most sentimental value to me. And I enjoyed that more than like getting a 2 million view video or like a 500,000 viewed video. Just because I knew the meaning that it had to the target audience.
Yeah. And it's honestly like you're creating not for yourself. Like the goal is to be
Yeah.
creating for other people. So to hear people be impacted by work that you did, that's like the ultimate praise, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
That's so awesome. And other advice that you might have for like people that want to get into the creating environment, like obviously your story is very unique and kind of a difficult path to follow.
Yeah.
But is there any advice that you have to other people that want to get into either becoming a creator, whether it's in content or just in general?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the biggest things. I've had a lot of friends who have like started to dip their toes into it, and the biggest thing is like they're like, "What gear should I get?" And I would say unless you actually wanna like do videography too, I would say until you get like a few thousand followers or you actually decide this is something you want to do, just use your phone. Like
Mm.
I use my phone. I remember when I first originally started doing this too. I asked somebody this, and he said like he had a nice camera that he was like, that's my main camera. He said the second most camera I use is my phone. Most of my best performing videos were shot on my phone. Even some
Mhm.
like client stuff I've shot on my phone. Um, and to even the second part of that is you have everything you need right here. At this point, just with like my actual job right now, like I need nicer gear, nicer equipment. I need Adobe Premiere Pro. I need Final Cut. But one of like my clients who has like I think 2 million followers does everything on his phone. He edits on his phone. He edits on CapCut, and he's had like insane traction. You can do everything you want in like your hand right here,
Mhm.
and it's all free too. Once you get this phone, CapCut's free, Premiere's free, TikTok, YouTube, everything's free. There's really nothing holding you back except your own inhibition,
Mhm.
which it's also like anything else. You just got to get the reps in. Like even
Right.
I just shot a video today after like probably not shooting for like a week or like a week or two, and it still felt like you had to get the rust off a little bit. And
Yeah.
especially when you're first starting, it's not easy. And even like a year later, it's still not just super easy to just turn on after the camera's on. So you just need to get started and realize you have everything you need right here.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of people's barriers because they want to believe that there's something standing in the way of them and whatever they're trying to accomplish. And so gear being the first thing, being like, okay, I don't have the proper gear. Like people ask me all the time, Sarah, how do you start a podcast? What microphone should I get? What should my setup be? What camera do you use? I'm like, dude, I literally use my iPad that I've been using since I was in high school, and I my dad bought me a microphone from Amazon. Like you don't really have to do that much. And so I think that it's a lot of people want to believe that it is some laborious process, that that's what's preventing them from doing it. But it's really like, saw a TikTok recently that was like, you can start your own business for free. Like there's marketing tools, there are videography tools, there are so many business tools that you can use that are free, that are at your fingertips, should you go out looking for them. So I think that's really sound advice and a good note to end on. Max, I really appreciate your time and taking the hour away from your girlfriend in her lovely room. Give her some compliments on her cowboy hats.
I will.
Um,
I will.
and I hope that you enjoy your time in Oxford. I miss that place.
Thank you. Oh yeah, I'm excited to see your podcast blow up.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We're hoping influencer status. We'll see. All right. Thanks,
Okay,
Max.
awesome. I'll talk to
Bye.
you later.